What's going on, everybody? My name is Angelo Scott, and I just want to hop on here and discuss a few things relating to the Certified Performance Sports Scientist exam. So I know there's not many videos out there that really kind of explain kind of the process and what it really takes to go through and study and pass the exam. So I just want to give out just a few tips and things that I feel may be helpful for those who are looking for information out there. For anybody who's unfamiliar, the Certified Performance Sports Scientist exam is through the NSCA, the National Strength Conditioning Association. And the big thing here is that with this exam is that I would say the biggest thing is that there's a few ways to look at it and go about it. Is that for those who are looking into careers relating to performance science, sports science, more looking at you could say data-oriented in relation to performance and physical training is definitely a great exam in contrast to the CSCS, or Certified Strength Conditioning Specialist exam, also offered through the NSCA. That is definitely for if you're looking to be a strength conditioning coach in the field, whether that's all the way from youth, private sector, all the way through professional. So I would say that's just two big main differences between say the CPSS exam and the CSCS exam. Relating to things that I would say is definitely beneficial for studying for the exam, I would say first and foremost, you're going to want to find a copy or purchase this textbook, the NSCA's Essentials of Sports Science. This is going to be your primary source for reading and understanding material that's going to be on the exam. I would say definitely that's going to be your biggest thing that you want to go through and read and just kind of disseminate and look at all the information throughout each of the chapters. For those who are unfamiliar, the textbook that I just showed, that has around 31 chapters in it. And so the biggest thing is that once you get a hold of a copy of that, either again purchasing, renting, or borrowing from someone, I would say you definitely want to, or a suggestion that I would say is just go through and even if you can't read through all the chapters in depth, skim the chapters and try to highlight the main points. There's going to be a lot of bolded words or keywords, key terms. You're going to want to pay attention to those, focus on those graphics. Those are very important for understanding key concepts and breaking them down. I would also say if you're ever short on time, say you register for the exam and then you got to the point when you're like, I really got a crunch time and I mean I've got through everything, definitely looking through the conclusion sections, skimming the text again, but if you're really short on time, look at the conclusion sections. In addition to reading the textbook, I would highly suggest getting used to reading published research. In terms of published research, I mean peer-reviewed articles, and you can find those on things such as Google Scholar or PubMed. So these are kind of large search engines in which they have peer-reviewed and published research. And so feel free to look up topics that you're interested in relating to sports performance. So this way you can kind of get a hang of seeing what type of research currently exists. There's so much research out there, so definitely try to narrow down some sports performance related topics that you might find interesting so you can start reading those and understanding the entire process and breakdown of what published research looks like. So a big thing is that most published research is going to include an abstract, which is essentially a summary of the entire research article. And then you're going to have an introduction, oftentimes having a background or literature review relating to the topic itself. And then you're going to have a methodology section, which is what the researchers who are trying to answer a question, kind of what they did in terms of how they went about trying to obtain the data for the question. And then you're going to have a results section in which they kind of did their statistical analysis in terms of whatever specific stats they want to run, and then they have data that they obtained from that. And then there's usually a discussion section in which they kind of relate the research that exists and tie that into the research that they found based upon the data and the results that they have. And then I know with the NSCA they have a practical application section, which is really important for sports performance practitioners of all ranges and understanding how we can tie all of this data and make it actually practical or great for the end user. And then usually with most research, there's also a conclusion section at the end. And this conclusion section really kind of breaks down the final summary of the entire research that was done, and then what you can conclude from the research that was conducted. And another few resources that I would say is definitely beneficial is looking into the Performance Science Study Group. I have a friend named Daniel Yu, and he has provided a great resource for many professionals out there. And I would say that's definitely something that is worth looking to. I know they're on YouTube as well as they're on other social media sites. So definitely look into that and definitely try to find either people who have taken it or find other resources online that see if they can break down the information. Again, your main primary resource is going to be the textbook itself, but also other resources. Again, I mentioned Daniel Yu's his Performance Science Study Group. Definitely a very great resource to utilize. When it comes to actually getting prepared to take the exam, you're going to have to do a few things. You're going to have to initially get, you could say, accepted to take the exam. And I know that the NSCA, they have two routes specifically for the CPSS exam, and they have like a full-time and a part-time route. And they have those PDFs that you can fill out on their website when you say if you want to Google search CPSS exam, and then they're going to have the process there that will provide the acceptance, and then you can register after you're formally accepted. And so again, with that formal acceptance, you have two different routes, either a full-time route or a part-time route. And I know for some people, it just depends on what you have. I know for the exam, they require that you have a minimum of a bachelor's, and then that kind of differentiates between when you have that full versus part-time options. And so I know it varies depending on the person and their situation. So definitely look into those two PDFs and see which one or the criteria that you would fit best to fill out for the full-time application or the part-time application. In addition to filling out that application, there's an application that's on the NSCA portal once you log into the NSCA. And so you'll have to, one, submit your application, which is either, again, that full-time or part-time PDF. And once you have that filled out and signed, then you can upload that, as well as you're going to also need to upload your CPR or AED certification. And then you're also going to have to upload, I believe, I think a $25 fee, and that will go toward the exam cost. And so those are just a few things that you have to apply, and that's part of like an application within the NSCA login once you're logged in. And so once you fill out that, again, that full-time or part-time application depending on your situation, CPR and AED, and then also $25, and then the general application itself. You will submit that, and then NSCA, they'll eventually give you an email back with a couple different what you call statuses. So like, say you're in processing, or you've been approved to take the exam. And so a couple different statuses like that, and they'll email you back and forth saying whether you're pending or you've been approved, things such as that. In terms of cost of the exam, I know for members it's around $340, and for non-members it's around, I think, $475. And so definitely that is something to consider in terms of when you're at the point for registration for the exam, because I know for some that may be pretty important, that cost. So just keep that in mind in terms of when you're ready to register for the exam. I know in terms of actually exam registration, and once you go through the process of doing the registration for the exam and paying, there usually will be a process of you're gonna have to find like a testing site, often offered through, say, like, for example, a Pearson VU testing center or approved testing center. And so you'll eventually find that, and then once you go through your local testing center, and that's still going to be all online, then you can actually register a date, and then of course you'll get an email confirming that this is your location and this is where you're going to be taking the exam. And then you set that date, and then that is when you just really study and try to time up your studying to make sure that you're prepared for that date. I would say the biggest thing is, say on the day of testing, um, stick to your normal routine. I know some people have certain things they like to do on test days. Some people like to, go work out. Some people like to sleep in. Some people like to eat a big meal. Do whatever you do normally, but definitely stay consistent in what you do. And I would say don't be nervous. If you are nervous, kind of really just understand that trust your training, trust your studying, and trust the resources that have been around you and that you've sought out. And just know that when you're in the exam and taking it, put on the hat of you're a sports scientist, and that these scenarios or situations that you may read or encounter throughout the exam, or certain questions that you're trying to figure out which answer is correct, think about how are those actually going to be applicable in terms of a sports setting. If this was a real life situation and this is something that I'm put in, how am I going to actually answer and go about it? Or how am I going to understand these concepts which may lead to the correct answer? And so those are definitely some things that I would keep in mind. Staying consistent whatever routine that you have the day of the exam or leading up to it, as well as understanding that when you're in the exam, put on that sports scientist hat and just understand that you can do this, you're qualified, and you know the right answer. The biggest thing I would say is that when you're studying for the exam, study the best way that you know how. And that means whether that's taking notes, recording videos, finding other sources and videos that may help you learn. I would say do all those which really help you learn the best. Again, I would say your biggest thing is you're going to want to read through chapter. You don't necessarily have to go chapter by chapter, but look through some of the big chapters. I would say you're going to want to hit on those main graphics that are throughout the textbook. So you're going to want to also think about what's on the exam outline, and that exam outline is on the NSCA's website. When you look into CPSS Exam Outline, probably type that into Google, you're definitely going to find the exam outline. And so you're going to want to see the sections that are mentioned in that exam outline, and those are going to be kind of sections that will be discussed on the exam. And so you might, if you're short on time, want to look through those areas throughout the textbook. Again, the entire textbook, it's kind of free game when it comes to the exam. So you're going to want to try your best to go through as much of the textbook as you can. It is a pretty dense textbook, so it may take you a while. And I would say for myself, I took time. I was exposed to the textbook a few years ago, but I kind of picked it back up because I did want to take the exam. And so when I kind of looked back at the textbook and started actually looking and reading more into detail, I took a few months, at least 3 to 6 months, to just kind of look at each chapter, take notes, or just read. My personal preference is I like to underline. I know some people like to highlight, but whatever you like to do, go ahead and do that, which is best for you. But in terms of the textbook, reading through that is going to be your biggest help, so that you understand the information that they're going to be pulling for the exam itself. And so that's the biggest thing that I would suggest for anyone looking to take the exam. I just want to hop on here and again just provide some additional information for anyone looking for just study tips or information about the exam. I know it is relatively new in the past few years, and so some people are starting to get into it, some people are curious, and some people are just at different phases about where they're figuring out about career choices. And it's something that everybody kind of goes through in life regardless of the industry that you're in. So I just hope to provide a little bit of insight into looking into taking the Certified Performance Sports Scientist exam through the NSCA. And so if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. You can contact me through my email, and I can push that here in the comments. And I'm always a happy and helpful resource to help anybody who's just kind of curious. And I know it's not always easy, but it's definitely something that is worth taking. regardless of if you're a strength conditioning coach or someone who, again, wants to specifically work as a sports scientist. I think that regardless of what you do, the data that you may encounter in your life, depending on where you're at, that may come into play. So it provides you a good foundation of how to handle that if you're in roles when you're dealing with athletes, data, or a mix of the two. And so I would say the information that you learn through the textbook is definitely going to be very valuable regardless of the career that you go into. Being able to disseminate information, understand about how more of these science and technology and scientific foundations, how in the research process, how that applies to working with athletes. I think all that is definitely going to be beneficial for you going forward. So with all that being said, I just want to thank you for hopping on, and have a great day, and God bless you.